because it was the kind of rain that sounds like static on an old radio. Endless, uncertain, somewhere between music and silence. The kind of night that blurs the line between prayer and regret. I was under the bridge, same as always, the fire breathing soft light over the wet concrete. That's when I saw him, standing just beyond the circle of warmth, a man watching the flames like someone trying to remember what light feels like. He was tall, thin, his coat soaked through. His beard was grey, but not old, his hands steady but tired. He had that look people get when they've run out of directions, but keep walking anyway. "You can come closer," I said. "Fire doesn't charge rent." He gave a small smile, then stepped into the glow. In his hands, he held something wrapped in plastic, a book. I didn't need to see the cover to know what it was. The pages stuck together, the spine cracked, rain making the ink run like veins. "You keep it dry?" I asked. "Try to," he said, sitting down across from me. "It's all I've got left that still talks back." The fire snapped between us, throwing sparks into the dark. After a while he spoke again, voice low, almost careful. "Do you think God still listens to me?" The question hung there, heavy as the river. I didn't answer right away. Questions like that aren't meant to be answered fast. "Depends," I said finally, "on what you're saying." He looked at the fire instead of me. I stopped saying anything years ago. Figured he stopped listening first. He laughed, a hollow sound that didn't belong to laughter. "My name's Michael," he said. "Used to be Pastor Michael, if that means anything anymore." I nodded. "Used to be a lot of things myself, and now I tell stories," I said, "mostly to the dark." He smiled at that. "Then maybe I came to the right place." He stretched his hands toward the flames, palms open, like he was waiting for an answer that might come through heat instead of words. "I used to tell people God talks in whispers," he said. "But these days, I think maybe he just stopped talking." "Maybe you stopped listening," I said. "Maybe," he admitted. "You ever lose something that big?" "Faith? No," he said softly. "The reason for it." I looked at the Bible in his hands. "You said that's all you've got left, that still talks back." "Yeah, so what does it say?" He smiled again, bitter and small. "It says nothing." I tore the pages that used to talk too loud. I stared at him for a moment, the rain filling the silence between us. "What happened?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a match from his pocket, lit it against the sole of his boot, and watched the flame die before it reached his fingers. "I'll tell you," he said finally. "But you won't like it. I don't like much anymore," I said. He nodded slowly, as if that made us equals. "Then listen close. Maybe you'll find something in it I couldn't." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes lost in the fire. "I had a church once," he said, "small, nothing special. Just a handful of people who needed to believe something good still lived in this city. I believed it too. At least I tried. We used to feed people on Sundays, soup, bread, sometimes hope if we had any left. One winter, a kid started showing up. 15, maybe 16. Name was Aaron. Quiet, polite, never asked for food, just sat in the back while I preached. One night he stayed after everyone left. Asked if he could talk. Said he'd done something bad, something he couldn't undo." Michael paused, the memory flickering across his face like light through rain. "He said he'd hurt someone. Didn't say who. Just kept saying he didn't mean to, that he wanted to make it right. I told him he could. That's what we're supposed to say, right? God forgives. There's always a way back." He looked at me then, eyes sharp, desperate. But I didn't know what he'd done. Not really. And I told him to go confess. Said truth was the only path to grace. 2 days later, the police found him in an alley. Bullet in his head. Turned out the person he hurt was the son of a gang leader. I told him to confess, and he did. To the wrong people. The fire crackled, loud and cruel in the silence that followed. After that, he whispered, I stopped preaching, stopped praying, stopped believing that God was listening to anyone who ever tried to do the right thing. I let the words settle before I spoke. You think that was your fault. I know it was. You gave him advice. You didn't pull the trigger. Doesn't matter, he said. I told him to walk into the light. I just didn't know it was fire. He fell quiet, eyes unfocused, as if watching ghosts move through the flames. After a long while he said, You ever pray, Walter? I hesitated. Sometimes. Why? Habit, maybe. Or hope. One of the two. And does he listen? Sometimes, I said again. But not always the way we want. He looked at the Bible in his lap, turning it over like it might start speaking again if he held it right. I used to tell people God was in the silence, he said. Now I think maybe he's in the noise, in the traffic, the arguments, the rain. Maybe he never stopped talking. Maybe I just got too proud to hear him where I didn't want to look. He sighed, shoulders sinking. Funny thing is, I still carry this book. Not because I believe it, but because I don't know what to do without it. I nodded slowly. Maybe that's belief too. He smiled faintly, the kind that hurts more than tears. You know, he said, sometimes I think he still hears me, but maybe he just doesn't forgive me. You're sure you need him to? I asked. Yeah, he said softly, because I don't forgive myself. The rain outside grew louder, falling in thick sheets that blurred the edges of the world. We sat there, two broken men by a small fire, trying to keep the dark from swallowing everything. Finally, I asked, What made you come here tonight? A dream, he said. I saw the kid, Aaron. He was standing on the bridge smiling, said he was fine, said God found him. Then he asked me, So why didn't you let him find you? He laughed again, the sound dry, cracked. I woke up shaking, walked until I couldn't anymore. Ended up here. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a cross made of wire and wood, hand-carved, one arm broken. I was going to throw it into the river, he said, but I didn't. Maybe I came here to see if someone else would do it for me. I stared at the cross, the rough metal glinting in the firelight. Maybe you should keep it, I said. Not because it means what it used to, because it still means something. What if I don't know what that something is? Then find out, I said. You're still breathing. That's proof you're not done. He looked at me, eyes tired, but alive again for the first time. You really think God still listens to people like me? I looked back at the fire, then at him. I think he listens to whoever's still trying to speak. He nodded slowly, gripping the cross tighter, as if holding onto that was holding onto a heartbeat. The river sighed below us, the fire burned lower, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, faint, off-key, but still ringing. The next morning, the rain hadn't stopped. It came down thin and steady, the kind that doesn't flood streets, but floods thoughts. Michael was still there under the bridge when I woke up, sitting close to the fire, staring at the cross he'd held all night. It was blackened at the edges now, scorched by accident or purpose, I couldn't tell which. He didn't speak at first, and neither did I. We just listened to the rain hitting the steel beams above us, each drop a slow clock counting something down. Finally, he said, I keep hearing the bell. What bell? I asked. The one from St. Matthew's, my church. It used to ring every Sunday morning. I swore I heard it again last night after you fell asleep. I looked toward the river, but the only sound was the water dragging itself past the rocks. The church still standing? I asked. He shrugged. Standing, maybe. Alive, no. He paused, his voice quieter. It's just a shell now. They shut it down after everything. After Aaron, I said. He nodded, eyes on the ground. He stood up, stretching the stiffness from his back. "You ever been back to a place that used to know you?" "Plenty of times," I said. "They never recognize me anymore." He smiled at that, a sad understanding between broken men. "I think I need to see it," he said. "One last time. Maybe it's crazy, but I can't keep pretending it's gone if it's still out there breathing dust." I didn't ask why he wanted me to go with him. I just said, "Let's walk." We moved through the city slow, the rain turning every street into a mirror that showed us versions of ourselves we didn't want to see. The closer we got to the old districts, the quieter it became. The buildings leaned into each other like tired men, and the air smelled of rust, wet brick, and yesterday's sermons. When we finally turned the corner onto Birch Street, I saw it. The church, St. Matthew's. It looked smaller than I imagined. The front doors were boarded up, the windows covered in grime, the sign half missing. The letters that remained spelled only Matt. The cross on top was tilted, rust streaking down the stone like dried blood. The bell tower still stood, though, a dark shape against the pale sky. Michael stopped a few feet from the entrance. He didn't move for a long time. I watched his shoulders rise and fall, his breath visible in the cold air. "It's still here," he whispered. "It shouldn't be." He walked up the steps and touched the wood where the door used to open freely. "They used to line up outside," he said. "Mothers, old men, kids. Every Sunday, I'd tell them God loved them more than they knew, and I believed it. I really did." I stepped closer, the rain dripping from the brim of my coat. "Maybe he still does." He looked at me, eyes wet from more than the rain. "Then why did he let me destroy the one thing I built for him?" "You didn't," I said. "The world did. You just stopped fixing it." He shook his head, the movement small, defeated. "I used to think I could fix everything, one prayer at a time." He pushed against the door, and the board cracked enough for him to slip inside. I followed, the smell of damp wood and dust swallowing us whole. The inside was dim, shafts of grey light cutting through the holes in the roof. The pews were covered in debris, the altar warped by moisture. But in the center, beneath the fallen beams, the cross was still standing, crooked, scarred, but upright. Michael walked slowly down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the hollow space. He stopped halfway and knelt, wresting the broken cross from his pocket beside the one still standing. "You ever feel like you left a version of yourself somewhere?" he asked. "Everywhere," I said. "I think I leave pieces behind just to see if any of them find their way back." He laughed quietly, no joy in it. "I left mine here." The man who believed. He reached into his coat and pulled out something else, a small folded paper, yellowed with age. "This was my last sermon," he said. "I never preached it. I wrote it the night before Aaron died." He handed it to me. The ink was blurred in places, but the first line was still clear. "Forgiveness is not the absence of consequence. It's the willingness to stand beside someone in the fire." I read it twice before speaking. "You never gave this sermon." "No," he said. "I didn't think I deserved to talk about forgiveness after what happened." "Maybe. That's exactly why you should have." He smiled faintly. "You sound like a preacher. I just listened to too many of them." He stood again, looking at the altar. "You know what the hardest part was? Not losing faith in God. Losing the belief that he could still want to listen to someone like me." "Maybe he never stopped," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "You really believe that?" "I believe silence isn't always absence," I said. "Sometimes it's patience." He walked to the altar, running his fingers across the cracked wood. The air was cold enough to bite. "This is where I told people to bring their pain," he said. "They'd leave it here and I'd pick it up. Every Sunday, I took a piece home with me until I didn't have room left for my own." He turned toward me, and when the weight finally crushed me, I blamed him for not catching it. I stepped closer, my boots scraping against the stone. Maybe he did catch it, I said. Just not the way you wanted. He looked up toward the bell tower. Then why can't I hear him? Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe hearing isn't believing. Maybe believing is staying even when it's quiet. He closed his eyes, head bowed. That's easy for you to say it's not, I said softly. I've been under that bridge so long, I started thinking maybe he forgot me too. But then you showed up, asking the kind of question that only someone who still has faith would ask. He opened his eyes again, a faint light returning to them. Faith, he said quietly. Maybe it's just another word for trying. The wind blew through the broken window, scattering dust across the floor. Michael bent down, picked up a fallen hymn book, and brushed it off. Funny, he said. This was the song we used to sing before every service. He opened it to a page near the middle and read aloud. Though the storm may drown the choir, still the melody survives. He looked up at me. Guess that means something, huh? Maybe it means we're still singing, I said. He nodded, set the book back on the pew, and walked slowly toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back one last time. I think I just needed to see that it's still here, even broken. Most things worth believing are, I said. Outside, the rain had eased into mist. The bell tower loomed above us, silent but solid. Michael looked up at it, his expression unreadable. Do you hear it? He asked. No. I do, he whispered. Not loud, just enough. I didn't argue. Some sounds aren't meant to be shared. He put his hands in his pockets, the broken cross poking out slightly. Thank you for coming, he said. I didn't think anyone would want to follow me into a place like this. I've followed worse ghosts, I said. He smiled faintly, and for the first time since I met him, he didn't look like a man waiting for punishment. He looked like someone waiting for the rain to stop. We started walking back toward the bridge, the city lights bleeding through the fog. He walked beside me this time instead of behind. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. By the time we made it back to the river, the rain had turned to drizzle. The fire under the bridge had burned out, leaving only smoke curling up through the cracks in the concrete. Michael sat down beside the ashes, rubbing his hands together for warmth that wasn't there. I could tell something had shifted in him at the church. Not peace exactly, but a quiet he hadn't had before. I sat across from him, waiting. The city above us hummed with traffic and distance. After a long silence, he said, "There's someone I should have told you about. Aaron's mother." His voice caught slightly. She came to the church once, after the funeral. She wanted to know why her son went to see me. Wanted to know what I told him. What did you say? I told her the truth, he said. That he wanted to confess that I told him too. She didn't say anything, just stared at me. Then she asked if I thought God still listened to me. I told her I didn't know. He laughed once, hollow. Guess I never stopped hearing her ask that question. Maybe that's why it's still echoing. He looked up, the streetlight from the bridge cutting across his face. She came back once more, a few months later. Left something at the door. I never opened it. Didn't want to know what was inside. What was it? He hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small box wrapped in paper, the edges frayed. I've kept it all this time, he said. Couldn't throw it away, couldn't face it either. He handed it to me. The paper tore easily under my fingers. Inside was a photograph, an old one, folded in half. It showed a young boy sitting on a church step, a small cross pendant around his neck. He was smiling, sunlight catching his hair. I recognized the steps. St. Matthew's. Written on the back in a shaky hand were 4 words. He believed in you. Michael stared at the picture like it might burn him. She wanted me to remember that. To remember that her son believed in me. And you can't forgive yourself for what happened, I said. He shook his head. How do you forgive yourself for killing someone's faith in you? That's worse than death. He believed I could lead him home, and I led him straight into the dark. You didn't lead him there, I said quietly. You just couldn't see where he was going. He didn't answer. His eyes had gone distant again, focused on something far beyond the river. The fog made the lights of the city blur into halos. I reached into my coat and pulled out my notebook. You know, I said, I keep a list in here. Names of people who didn't get to finish their stories. People this city buried twice, once in the ground and once in memory. He looked at me. Why? So they don't disappear completely. He nodded slowly. Then maybe you should write his name down too. I did. Aaron, just below another name that had faded with time. I closed the notebook. Feels like something I should have done years ago, Michael said. Maybe this is years ago, I said. The kind that never really ends. We sat for a while longer, the sound of water filling the spaces between sentences. Then Michael said, there's one more person you should meet. She used to help at the church. Her name's Grace. She was the one who found him that night. I heard she still works over on 9th Street, runs a soup kitchen now. She might remember more than I do. I looked at him. You want to go there? He nodded slowly. If she'll see me. Then we go together, I said. The next afternoon, the rain finally broke. The sky was still grey, but the clouds had started to open, letting through narrow bands of sunlight that looked more like mercy than weather. We walked the length of 9th Street in silence until we found the place. A small building wedged between two warehouses, a faded sign above the door reading Grace's table. Inside, it smelled of bread and broth. Volunteers moved quietly between tables, ladling soup into chipped bowls. The air was heavy with warmth and exhaustion, but it felt alive. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 50s, her hair tied back with a scarf, sleeves rolled up. She was serving a man at the end of the line when she looked up and froze. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment she just stared at Michael. Then she set the ladle down and walked around the counter. Michael, she said softly. Grace, I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again. Neither was I. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded toward a corner table. Sit. I'll bring you something warm. We sat. A minute later, she came back with 2 bowls of soup and a loaf of bread. She placed them down gently, her hands trembling. You look older, she said. So do you, he answered. She smiled sadly. I suppose that's fair. She sat across from him, folding her hands. I heard about you, she said. After the church closed, people said you disappeared. I hoped you hadn't. I did, he said. At least for a while. Her gaze softened. You came here because of Aaron. He nodded. I had to. I keep asking myself if God still listens to me. Maybe you know the answer better than I do. Grace leaned back, eyes glistening. You think silence means he isn't listening? Maybe silence is his way of waiting for you to stop running. Michael's jaw tightened. You think he forgives me? I think he already did. You just never let yourself believe it. He shook his head. I told that boy to confess. I sent him to his death. You gave him truth, she said. You couldn't control what the world did with it. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling before he could stop them. I keep seeing him, he whispered. In dreams, in the rain. Every time I close my eyes, he's there. Then maybe he hasn't left because he still has something to tell you, Grace said softly. You're still carrying him. Maybe it's time to set him down. He looked at her helplessly. How? She reached across the table, resting her hand on his. By believing that he forgave you first. The room had gone quieter around us, the hum of conversation dimming as if the world knew to listen. Grace turned to me. You're his friend? Something like that, I said. She nodded. Then stay with him. He's been alone too long. Michael looked at her, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think God still listens to me, Grace?" She smiled faintly. "Always. But sometimes he waits for you to listen back." He sat there, tears slipping down his face, the sound of rain against the windows beginning again, soft and steady. Grace squeezed his hand, then stood. "There's a service tonight," she said. "Small. Nothing fancy. You should come. Maybe it's time you stop talking to the dark and start talking to him again." Michael didn't answer, but I saw something change in his eyes, a flicker, faint but real. Grace walked back to the counter, leaving us alone. Michael looked down at his bowl, then up at me. "You think she's right?" "I think she's the first person you've listened to in a long time." He smiled weakly. "Then maybe that's a start." Outside, the rain was easing again, the clouds breaking just enough for the light to slip through the cracks. It fell across the table, warm and golden, touching the cross that lay between us. I think both of us felt it. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the kind of quiet that comes right before it. That night, the city felt heavier than usual, as if every streetlight carried its own kind of confession. The rain had stopped completely, leaving behind that clean smell of pavement that only comes after something has been washed away. We walked back toward the old district in silence. Michael carried the broken cross in his hand, thumb rubbing across the rough wood like he was afraid to let go of it. When we reached St. Matthew's, the sky had gone dark. The bell tower loomed above us, cracked and tired, but somehow still standing. The door we'd forced to open earlier hung loose, creaking against the wind. Inside, the air was colder than before. Our footsteps echoed across the empty space, ghosts returning to their graves. Michael stopped near the altar, his eyes fixed on the same crooked cross that had survived the years. "You think anyone ever comes here anymore?" he asked quietly. "Maybe," I said. "People come to ruins more often than they admit. Sometimes it's the only place they can talk without being interrupted." He nodded, slowly, walking toward the altar. He set the small wooden cross down beside the larger one, the two shadows overlapping like the past and the present shaking hands. "When I first built this place," he said, "I told God I'd fill it with people who needed him. But I think I built it for myself. I thought if I could save enough souls, I'd earn the right to be heard." He looked back at me. "You ever think you mistook your own voice for his?" I smiled faintly. "Every day." He gave a weak laugh, then turned back toward the altar. "Grace said something today," he continued. "She said, maybe silence isn't God ignoring me. Maybe it's him waiting for me to listen." He reached into his coat, pulling out the photograph of Aaron. He set it gently on the altar beside the crosses. "I keep hearing him in my dreams," he said. "He tells me he's fine, but I never answer. Maybe it's time I do." He sank to his knees, head bowed, the flicker of candlelight from my lighter dancing across his face. His voice trembled as he spoke, not a sermon, not a speech, just a whisper that belonged only to him and the dark. "God," he said, "I don't know if you're still there. I don't know if you ever left. But if you can hear me, if you still listen to the ones who broke what they were given, I just need you to know I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for what I stopped doing. For giving up on you when you never gave up on me." His words filled the room, soft but heavy, clinging to the broken wood, to the cracked walls, to everything that had been left behind. For a long moment, nothing happened. The air felt too still, the silence too loud. I wanted to say something, anything, but the kind of prayer he was making didn't need witnesses. It needed witnesses to stay quiet. Then, somewhere high above us, the bell moved. Single, slow sound rang through the tower, low and even, like metal waking from sleep. Then another and another. Michael's head snapped up. Tears filled his eyes. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, even though the sound felt more like vibration than noise. Something deep, old, familiar. The kind of sound that goes straight through bone and memory. He laughed, the sound breaking into a sob. "I didn't pull the rope," he said. "I know," I said softly. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Then maybe that's his way of saying he was listening." I stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. Or maybe he never stopped. He stayed there, kneeling. The bells still ringing faintly in the distance, the echoes blending with the wind through the broken windows. It didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like forgiveness, finding a way in. When the sound finally faded, Michael stood slowly. His face was wet, but his expression was calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm finally remembers how to stop. He looked at the photograph on the altar, then at me. "He's gone," he said. "No," I said. "He's free." He nodded, looking round the ruined church one last time. "You know," he said, "I used to think this place died with him. But maybe it was just waiting for this." We started walking toward the exit. Halfway down the aisle, he stopped, reached into his pocket, and took out his Bible. The cover was worn, the pages warped from water and time. He looked at it for a moment, then set it down gently on the nearest pew. "You're leaving it?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "I think it's time to stop carrying it and start living it." We stepped outside. The night had gone completely still. No wind, no rain, no traffic. Just the soft hum of the city breathing again. The clouds had broken enough for the moon to show through, silver light falling over the church steps. Michael turned to me. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For listening. That's all I did." He shook his head. "No, you stayed. That's what no one else did. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. Some words don't need to be spoken when they've already been lived." We stood there for a while, two men under the fading glow of the church's shadow. Then Michael took a deep breath, looked at the river below, and said, "You know, I used to preach about redemption. Spent years talking about it like it was a miracle that only happened in holy places. But now, I think it happens anywhere someone chooses to forgive themselves." He looked back toward the bell tower. "And maybe that's what just happened." "Maybe so," I said. He smiled, a real one this time. "If God's still listening," he said quietly. "I hope he knows I finally heard him." The bell gave one last soft sound, a metallic sigh that disappeared into the night. We walked back toward the bridge in silence. The city was breathing again. Distant sirens, the hum of streetlights, the wet whisper of tires on asphalt. The kind of sounds you don't notice until you've spent enough time in silence to miss them. Michael walked slower than before, but lighter. His steps didn't drag anymore. The broken cross was gone, left at the altar beside the photograph and the Bible, where it belonged. When we reached the river, the air was cool and clean. The fire from earlier had long gone out, but the stones still held a faint warmth, as if the memory of flame refused to die. Michael sat down, looking out over the water. The moonlight hit his face, soft and silver, and for the first time since I'd met him, his expression didn't look like punishment. It looked like peace. He stayed quiet for a while, then said, "You ever wonder why he lets us break before he fixes us?" I poked at the ashes with a stick. "Maybe that's how he gets us to listen. Some people only hear the whisper after the storm." He nodded, eyes on the water. "I used to think faith was certainty. But maybe it's just the courage to speak to silence and not expect an answer. Or maybe," I said, "it's realizing the silence was an answer all along." He smiled faintly. "You would have made a good preacher." I laughed. "No. I've said too many wrong things in my life to stand behind a pulpit." "Then you'd fit right in," he said, and his laughter carried farther than mine. We sat there until the city lights started to dim. A train passed somewhere in the distance, its horn low and tired, echoing off the steel. Michael took a deep breath, the kind that feels like starting over. "I think I'll go back to Grace's table tomorrow," he said. "She said she could use an extra pair of hands. Maybe I can still do something good." "You already did," I said. He looked at me, confusion crossing his face. "You came back," I said simply. "That's more good than most ever do." He nodded, eyes softening. "You know, when Aaron died, I thought I lost my right to speak to God. But tonight I realized something. Maybe God doesn't stop listening when we fall. Maybe he just waits until we're quiet enough to finally hear him." The river moved slow, reflecting the city lights in pieces like broken stained glass. The sound of it filled the space between us, steady, patient, eternal. Michael stood and brushed the dirt from his coat. "Do you ever think he listens to you, Walter?" I looked at the water, then at him. "Sometimes, but I don't think he always needs to." "Why's that?" "Because sometimes he just wants us to listen to each other." He smiled, and there was something holy about it. Not the kind you find in churches, but the kind that survives under bridges and inside broken people. He looked toward the city skyline, then back at me. "You'll keep telling the stories, won't you?" "Someone has to." He nodded. "Then tell them," I asked. "Tell them he did listen. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to." He started walking down the path that ran alongside the river, his silhouette fading into the thin fog rising off the water. I watched until he disappeared around the bend. The air felt lighter somehow, the kind of lightness that comes after confession, the kind that doesn't lift the weight, but teaches you how to carry it. I sat there alone for a long time, listening to the city breathe. The bridge above hummed with the rhythm of traffic, a heartbeat of the living world. I took out my notebook and turned to a fresh page. Michael, a man who once believed the silence meant God stopped listening, until he realized the silence was God waiting for him to speak again. I closed the book and placed it beside the fire pit. The ashes glowed faintly as a small gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and forgiveness. I looked out over the river one last time. The reflection of the moon trembled on the surface, as if even light has to struggle to stay whole. "Maybe he does still listen," I said quietly to the night. "But maybe the real miracle is that we still do." The wind picked up, brushing past me, carrying the faint sound of a bell. One last echo from St. Matthew's, soft, distant, almost human. I smiled and leaned back against the concrete wall, pulling my coat tighter. The city was waking again, voices rising, footsteps crossing overhead. "My name is Walter Gray," I whispered, the words familiar and honest. "And I am the voice on the sidewalk." The fire crackled once, the river sighed, and the night closed its eyes.